I think the minute I stepped on a practice field for rugby, the calling happened.
An 8-year plan to be on the team, and I was in it within 2 years.
Don't wait until you are a pro to be a pro, right?
Like, I like doing something, stopping and learning from it.
Like, it just looked like it was a heavy hit.
To give up, it's not up.
You know, that's the first time I played like professionally.
I'm making rugby money. How can I make money outside of it?
And there's two Scottish guys, and they said, "Oh, you're here for the movie."
Rugby is a sport where that's often coupled with actually having a good time.
He looked at me and he says, "You guys are awesome."
Grow rugby, grow rugby, grow rugby, grow rugby, grow rugby. Let's go to rock.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another great episode of Grow Rugby. My name is GiftTime Belu, and this is the show where we speak with people about the opportunities that they have found, created, and taken advantage of via rugby. Now, I have to say, we got an amazing guest for today for you. She is a former manager for the men's national team over the last 12 years, has been to multiple Rugby World Cups, went with them to the Olympics, so many sevens tournaments, I can't even begin to imagine to put a count on it. She is a muscle therapist as well as a former player. My friend, the dope, Sall, TORI, the original influencer, and the co-founder of the company, the original influencer. And guys, this is definitely one of my favorite conversations to have. It was enthralling. It was intriguing. It gave us a lot more depth into the team, the national team, and what goes on behind the scenes over at USA Rugby and more. But it was, I think you guys, no, I don't think, I know you guys are going to enjoy this. And this was just an amazing conversation to be able to have on that one. But before we get into that, I want to give a shout out to both the USA men's and women's national team. While Madrid Sevens this weekend did not turn out the way that we would like it to have been, big shout out, still coming in third, still showing that you're a top 5, top 3 team in the world, even though, hey, look, man, we got things to work on. But big shout out to two of our former Grow Rugby show guests, Ncheta Emba and Naya Tapper being a participant. Ncheta Emba knocking it out over at Madrid Sevens. So, I always want to be praising to those who have been able to give their time to us and being able to give us the stories of what's going on as they start getting ready for this Olympic journey. And then, of course, on the other side of it is the misfortune of Perry Baker and the fracture to his ankle, which means his Olympic play is in jeopardy. I don't know what's going to happen, but, 34, 35 and trying to heal back quick is no easy feat, to say the least. A brother can tell you this. So, look, we'll hopefully, put out the good vibes, prayers, whatever it is, because can't actually put our hands and, Mr. Miyagi, the ankle, into working again. So I hope it actually ends up really not being too lasting of an injury, because it would really suck to not have him for the Olympics this year, especially considering everything that's happened alongside with it. But needless to say, we're still even closer to MLR starting to come back again. It's actually 2 weeks now. We're at the beginning of March. MLR is coming back, so we're going to be having more rugby. I know Six Nations for a lot of people were there. I'm not a big Six Nations guy. I don't find Northern Hemisphere rugby to be the most interesting thing in the world, but I guess whenever you don't have very much, then you just go ahead and you deal with what you got to do. So, but I'm happy for Super Rugby to start getting ready to come back. Their fall test matches coming through, even though we're getting a very weird setup, send less South Africa and Argentina, but I mean, it's always been about New Zealand and Australia when it came down to it. So, so it's all good. Guys, just want to let you guys know we are going to have a little bit of a weird situation going into the next few shows because of the fact that I am going to be out of town. I'll be in Brazil, so recording from the start is going to be a little different with each one, but just give you the heads up. I'm keeping it up. We're still getting at the regular time, still hook you guys up. We got so many guests that we have to do, and we have so many guests that are still providing us great info, and I can't hold that back from you. So I hope you guys enjoy. I just want to let you know if it seems like some of the information might not be super relevant, and there's a reason. There's a reason. So, all right, I'm not going to hold us up for too long. I just want to make sure to remind you guys, hey, please, if you guys enjoy the show, please tell your friends about it. Let them come and follow, subscribe to the show on anchor.fm, or check it out on Apple Podcasts, or check it out on Google Podcasts or Spotify or iHeartMedia or wherever, just so you guys, we can continue to see the growth, continue to get things out there, of course, and constantly be able to make sure that we are sending out the message and making sure that we're creating a better connection to the people in rugby so that we can continue to enjoy the game of rugby that much more. I'm telling you, hallelujah, let it be known. Oh, and of course, please go subscribe to us on YouTube to be able to watch the show live. We're continuing to tweak it up, try and make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. So you guys will see that I'm already trying to do a little bit of the stand-up version. I just want to show it off if you can see it. Of course, if you're just listening to it, it is what it is. But, we're slowly trying to adjust it and getting ready for a bigger 2021. And want to make sure that you guys are just consistently satisfied. And like I said, share the show. We're going to start putting out mini clips so it makes it a little bit easier, because I know an hour and a half is hard for people who are just coming in. You want to test it out, test the water. So we're going to be dropping individual clips for you. And we got some other information. We got some other, content coming out as well, too. And on the last few things, please go ahead and leave a review on Apple Podcast or iTunes Podcast. Any reviews that we get helps us to be able to get a kind of centrist idea of what's going on, and allows us to be able to sell the show so that we can get you guys more content, but more importantly, so we can create a blueprint that you can use for your stuff, both as an individual rugby person, as a club rugby person, and all that good stuff, because all this matters when it comes to the growth of rugby, especially in non-major rugby countries. All right, guys. That's it that we have for announcements. Oh, and of course, no, that's it that we have for announcements. We're going to hit you up with some other stuff later on. But, guys, you guys stay tuned. You guys are going to enjoy this. The original influencer, the original U.S. men's national team's manager, the great Sarah Alice Sall. Check it out.
Grow rugby, grow rugby, grow rugby, grow rugby, grow rugby.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another great episode of Grow Rugby. My name is GiftTime and Bailu, and we got another incredible P. I always say this, and I feel like it always sounds weird, but this is one of literally the original influencers, the men's national team manager. We have a list here going through. Has been part of United World Sports. Has been an integral part of wins, Olympics, Rugby World Cups. As a player, as a masseuse, as a manager. Sarah Alice Sall. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I always love talking about like where things start, and I remember, I think the biggest start whenever I first heard about you was actually like it was two parts. It was a friend of a friend, and it was randomly seeing your profile on multiple occasions, and you just kept popping up everywhere, literally just popping up. And I'm like, who is this person? And so I think we have a mutual friend, Tiffany Faye, and she had mentioned you, and then you just start seeing him. Then again, you look up the person, you're like, okay, why do they keep popping up? And then
Facebook follows you, and it just
and that also helps. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, like, but it was a follow on that, because it was I followed, you followed, I followed, you followed, and then it was just like, okay, what we need to just connect. But it was still like you saw the profile, and I kept hearing it from other people. I heard it from you, from Tiff. I heard it from Grant Cole. I heard about you from Coma. I had heard about you from like one or two other people. I can't remember. So yeah, you kind of pop up a lot, and I was like, okay, all right, we gotta be able to, we gotta cross this. So want to reach out and make it happen, and we finally were able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like that I'm popping up on Facebook, because I feel like I'm trying not to be on it that much. But
look, we can't fight. We can't fight culture. All right,
I know.
We find a way through. But I always say, with every superhero, there's an origin story, and I am gonna call you a hero and a legend in this, because you are. But as I was. It's okay, Sarah. I got you. I'm gonna be the mouthpiece for you. Yeah. Yo, the legend here. I always like to ask where everything started. So for you, Sarah, how'd you get started with rugby?
Well, I mean, that's somewhat of your typical story. I started in college because we didn't have girls' high school, so I started at Delaware, and it was mainly because I didn't want to join a sorority. My dream was to train. It was something social to do. I long story short, I trained horses my whole life, and I wanted to go to the Olympics, and then realized in college, I just kind of went to school to have like a fallback road in college, but I didn't want to join the equestrian team, because it's kind of like there's people that are really competitive, and then people that wear horses on their shirts. And my as my trainer was half an hour, so I would go every day, have my classes in the morning, go train, and we do the series. And then I just realized I wasn't good enough. I was at the top level, and I still worked in training horses for a billionaire after school, but I started playing rugby because the people were really nice. And I wasn't that good in college. I just really not that good at anything I do. I just work really, really hard, and I educate myself. So I became captain really quickly.
Right.
I never drank before games because I never wanted to blame anything, and I always feel like I have to work that much harder to be. So I became good, but it wasn't until after school, which first time I saw a women's rugby game. And, I'm not 5'3". I was smaller then. I mean, I'm not as muscular as I am when I was playing, but I was like, I'm not playing this sport afterwards. And then all of my friends from college, we're kind of like, well, what do we do? So we wanted to play, and we played for this team called Brandywine. But, I got extremely, extremely lucky that some of my first experiences right after college where I got invited to Marfu, and, two of my heroes, M.A. Sorensen and Joe Kelly, who were my good friends who lived down the road. They were my Marfu coaches, and Krista McFerrin. I mean, like, you can't get, I don't know if you know, but you can't get better than these people. And then
only a couple Rugby World Cup winners. Yeah, no biggie.
Yeah, I mean, and like my friends, M.A. would call me up and be like, Sarah, what do you think about this? And she would come and practice with us. I mean, she was with Philly women at the time, but like she would come to our practices or help out if I asked, or Joe would help with scrum sessions. So like Joe would just sit there and he'd be like, we are so he was so old school in the sense, but he's like, we are so lucky. Like I remember being in Marfu's down in Florida, or ITTs, and he was like, that we get to play this game. Like, he's like, look at this day. Like, he was so inspiring. And then Emil Cygnus, who, these are all Pennsylvania people, but who, I had to educate some people, and I had him honored. I was just commenting on something the other day in 2013, who basically is probably the only person in USA Rugby that not one person could say anything poorly about. He is one of the most wonderful human beings. He he was in sevens in the 70s, way before. I mean, he was way above, before
Truly pioneering.
Everyone. He's coached anyone that has any influence in sevens, like, coached Jules McCoy, he coached Al Caravelli, he coached Alex Magleby, he coached, if you go, I did this What's Your Number campaign, and I had him honored in 2013 in Vegas, and Dan Lyle, let me name the invitational trophy after him, and Nigel had a big party for him, and I had 500 people, and people were giving me money to bring him there, because everybody, Kristen McFerrin played for him. I mean, everybody has, played for Emil, and he is so wonderful. So they were, right out of college, I got these two great experiences, and then I was, fortunate enough to go on a bunch of Atlantis tours. So I had these mentors and role models that probably ruined me, because they set such a high standard of,
expectation.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I went to Trinidad, and Emil is very soft-spoken, and he would just say two things, and everybody in the room would sit there and write down and listen. Not one person was, disrespectful at anything he said. People would be and sometimes Emil would be well, you're not fast enough, so you're you shouldn't be there, or, he did it in a way where it was such an honor to play for him. So
yeah.
That made me more competitive, because as we talked about the other day, I didn't know what I didn't know. So once I knew that there was this higher level out there, in college, I didn't, you went to Marfus, you was Mid-Atlantic, whatever, you lost to Penn State, and that was it. That's all I knew. I knew one person that went to All-Stars, we weren't really exposed to it.
Right.
Then I found out, oh wow, there's this whole world out there of higher level rugby. So, then I played club, but, I really love sevens, just because I was smaller, and it makes you accountable, and I love that. Right. So I, made people play sevens when they didn't want to. I went and practiced with Wilmington with 6 people, Wilmington men. I started, a team, and then I would fight my club about, playing sevens in the summer. And then, I was lucky enough to play internationally, and, half my best friends, are from other teams I played with, like I just told you, we were talking about Coma. I met her in Brazil, even though she's a Philly girl from down the road. But I met her in Brazil. I played with so many New York players, at different tournaments, that I say I'm their stepchild. Because I went to.
This is just we just became family at this point. It was right. At no point. They've basically been raising me under the guise of rugby.
Yeah, I played in a sevens tournament in Bermuda with them. It was all New York and me, and it's just back in the day when they used to have 3 sides. So
right.
Anyway, I got really competitive, and then I got injured, and because of Emil, I was at an invitational at San Diego Sevens, and he introduced me to our medical director, and then I got involved with the men's national team, which was great because it kind of coincided with I got injured, so I couldn't play, and so it gave me a gateway to
back into that high
but yeah, I mean, I'd still be playing. I mean, right now I had I had 7 knee surgeries, and I had a knee replacement. And I mean, I'd still be playing if I could. I mean, it's been 10 years, and it's still a huge loss for me.
It's it's literally one of those things that once it gets into the system, it just doesn't come out. It just becomes part of the blood. You kind of evolved into it, essentially.
Yeah, but yeah, out of all my friends, I was like, "Are your boots in the car? That means you want to play." So they would purposely, after they kind of retired, leave their cleats out, because they knew that I was the one going around and being like, you're playing, you're not coming off the field. I would go to Saranac Lake and play with 3 different teams. I mean, I was a pusher. I definitely,
Hey, you want to get some rugby? Let's get some rugby. I know you're going to like this rugby. Come on, let's go.
Well, I mean, they were rugby players, but they were just kind of I just want to go have fun. I'm like, you're playing. And I mean, it's still, once I got into, going to assemblies and World Cups and stuff, I go to the referees meetings, I go to the managers meetings. Right. I mean, even though I can't play, I love learning, which is the great thing. Cause I'm like, why wouldn't you? What are you going to do if you're traveling all day and not learning and evolving? So.
No, that's real. it's interesting because of the fact that so much of that is based in the fact of what you were able to learn from this family side of high performance while simultaneously already tapping into this competitive edge for you. Do you think that you would have had it, say, arguably, had you stayed in something like equestrian, that you think that your trajectory would have still been this deep for that as you would have been for rugby?
Well, it's funny. I stopped riding because, I was a show jumper. So I was, my trainer was a Grand Prix rider. But the world is just, it's like Formula One racing. It's just very overprivileged. You have to be, the top 1% to do well, and unless you are a millionaire.
Right.
And I realized that very early on that I just couldn't compete. But those were my dreams. But, we would do things like, in high school, the day after my prom, I didn't drink because I had a horse show at 5:00 the next morning. In college, even when I started playing rugby, I would have my classes in the morning. I would go ride and drive half an hour to go ride every day, and then go to rugby practice and then do my work. But I realized afterwards, because I started getting into rugby, we would go away for months at a time, somewhat like rugby, horse shows, there's local, but once you're at that level, I never went international with it because that's a whole.
And it's a different level of expense that goes into it.
Yeah, to fly horses, and quarantine them and all that kind of stuff. But, we go up and down the East Coast and do all this. And it was just it was too much. So then I tried to do a 9-to-5 job training horses, and it just wasn't for me. Right. But then it wasn't until years later when I was with the Sevens team, and as Mike Friday, he would say oh, these are my race horses, these are my whatever. So I'm so I quit riding so I could have a life and do other things. And then I was oh my God, I'm doing the same exact thing. It's just with people, not horses. I'm traveling around,
right,
24 hours a day, because we would have to do barn checks, at midnight, and you'd be up at 5. You can't sleep in with horses. And so I'm doing the exact same thing I did, except horses are easier to take care of than I'm doing this where I'm traveling long stretches of time, missing a lot of my friends and family events, and taking care of these people or animals. And so I get it. Yeah. So I think it's just in me that's what I love to do, that if I do something, I've been told I care too much. I'm going to do it 100%. One of the words I hate the most is mediocre. I don't want to be mediocre,
Oh no, I think that's real. And to be honest with you, it is one of those things that's a gift and a curse. Gift for the obvious reason that you're going to work and you're going to find a way to make something happen.
Yeah.
The curse being that it becomes the tunnel vision of I'm going to make something happen, and get out of my way, help me or get out of my way, but we're gonna get to this.
Yeah, the elite athlete well-being stuff that I kind of told you I was doing is interesting. We're having a topic, and I'm not calling myself an elite athlete whatsoever, but I was saying there's a very fine line between elite level athletes and obsessiveness,
right?
That you teeters, because you have to have a certain level of a huge level of commitment and a certain level of mindset, and telling yourself that you are the best and all this, but it's a very fine line to crossing that, right. Which is really interesting because you have to have certain traits to be at the top level.
Right.
But it is, like you just said, it's a blessing and a curse, because a lot of those traits then hurt you in other areas of your life, or when you're done with sports, it's
how you kind of fill in that space.
Right.
Look, we have the perfect example when it comes to the Michael Jordan effect, the hyper competitiveness. If you ask what he was going to be, this is probably the basketball was the best thing, because you wouldn't want that same level of focus for anything else. But it also means that you get to the best. That means something gets cut out within that process, right. Unfortunately. But I guess it's kind of pick and choose where it is, and then obviously the end game is what we have. But no, I love also within that factor, because it also speaks to what the level of commitment that we have, because I think even here in the States, and you know this, like whenever it comes to the understanding of what it means to be high performance and what the reality of what it means to be high performance, I don't think always coincide together for most the average athlete, let alone the average US rugby athlete. So for you, because you had this opportunity to see, not only be and help train these guys and help facilitate their development with these high performance athletes, and then subsequently seeing it with other countries' high performance athletes. For you, what has been one of the key gripes that you have with where people's average perception, I'm getting you, but but where the perception of it is for the average person to what the reality is whenever you're actually there?
Okay, I mean,
I've seen the arguments on Facebook, so I know there's already.
It's so hard to say, but like I would say, and I think it goes back to again, like being one of the only females in men's rugby, like, and I was willing to take that on, and I knew like I had to be extra good, and to set a standard, because I don't know if I'm wording this correctly, but I think as rugby players, and as we are emerging in the U.S. still, there's a level of responsibility that we have and that people don't realize. So I get really bothered because I see how hard these athletes, and just to say, I'll reference men a lot, which does not mean I supported women's rugby, but just because that's what my wheelhouse has been for the last 12 years. But I am, you
support them all, but this is where your expertise is.
I just want to preface that. So when I see these men like at World Cups, and like when our boys did not go out at all, because like in 2011 there's a scandal for like England's captain went out with like, so I see them not drinking, I see them getting up in the morning and how hard they're working and how hard they're training. I mean, part of that's because they have limited time together, or you see that when we become an Olympic sport. And then, if I'm wearing a USA Rugby stuff and I go down the road and people are like, oh, so, so they still drink before games? And I'm like, they're Olympic athletes. Like half of them hardly drink, number one. Like, but, and I think like all of the sacrifices that they're making to legitimize the sport for, basically for us, for the rest of the population, grassroots is so important, but they're doing it and they're paving a way, because rugby, I'm sure you could get it. Like people ask me, is that the one with where you're on horses with the stick, or that's lacrosse, like people, I'm like, no. So I get ultra sensitive when people like with that quarantine ruggers thing on Facebook, because I was like, we have to be better than that. Like if these men and women are setting an example, especially at the OTC where every day they're being observed and they're taking pride in their appearance, they're working their butts off, they're eating right, they're doing everything they can to legitimize this sport. And so I don't feel bad like when my old school Delaware got kicked off campus for drinking, because you should know better. Like we're not at a point where you can do these things, and you're setting the sport back so far when people are making such big sacrifices. And I mean, not just my opinion, because I'm not these athletes, but I see how much they sacrifice. And, there's a couple of screw ups now and then, but for the most part, people think that it's, you see on Instagram, like, especially in sevens and like I was telling you in 15s, because we're a tier 2 nation, we would go to Romania in the winter and Georgia, like we go to these places, or really hot places in South America, although Uruguay is a beautiful country, but like, we're in the middle of nowhere. We're in a hotel by ourselves. Sevens, we go to really nice places. We go stay by the Champs-Élysées in Paris and by the Opera House. But, we go and maybe, Cape Town, you go see Table Mountain, but you don't see us getting up at 7, doing testing, doing warm-ups, doing everything together, training 3 times a day or twice a day, all of the film sessions, all of the one-on-ones, all of the rehab sessions, so that's 95% of it, or flying 16 hours and then doing it all again. And as we talked about, like in sevens, you have to prepare like it's a 15s game. You prepare all day for 14 minutes, like if it's a 3-day tournament that you might not even play it. And then you have to recover. And then in the middle of that, you have to go do a box appearance for HSBC or go, and visit people. And you have to analyze the film after the match. And then you have to get ready for the next match. And then you have to analyze the film for who you're playing and have a whole different game plan. Right. So yes, we're doing it in beautiful places and the people are amazing. But for the most part, especially, in sevens, they are so professional. And I can say every other country too. They're just, everybody's working together because you're just in the same area all the time. Staff helps each other out from other countries. So I think the perception is like, oh yeah, you get to go all these fun places and do all these fun things. And, this is probably, and not you because, you're doing the announcing part, but a lot of people I've met, they'll be like, oh, we've been at the same places for the last 10 years. But I was not out of the bar. I was making Gatorade. I mean, I said my first 8 years of my career, I made Gatorade probably 70% of the day. Thank God sevens, they give you the bottles, but in 15s, I mean, that legitimately was most of what I did in my day is making Gatorade.
and the ironic part is, and what people don't realize is that when you're in that work mode, you're not here for what's going on around. It's not a tourist site. It's not we're just getting paid to be able to go, tour the areas. It's like, no, we're here to work. We're here to get the work done, and then we go. And
I talked about last week. I went to Japan 5 times. I realized because I went to the World Cup as a spectator for the first time, and I was like, I realized that was the 5th time I had been there, and I had not seen a thing. I mean, we went, we saw one temple in Tokyo, and then I think Mike Tolkien took us once to some, kind of rooftop bar thing to see a view for like an hour. But that's right. I didn't mind because that wasn't what we were there for. I can tell you about the stadiums and about the locker rooms and about how long it takes. I mean, I have, and I can tell you about a lot of airports. And
I know the best coffee spots inside. What do you call it? Whatever, Hokkaido Airport in Tokyo. Like, I got you guys. I got you. You want to go somewhere in the city? Look, I'm gonna let you know. There's a spot maybe around the stadium, but I don't actually even know that one.
Right. I can tell you about how the kitchen's set up and if the kitchen staff lets me go back there and get Gatorade and how the laundry is, but that's about it.
No, it's exactly it. And I think that it's really important to be able to do that. Like we were talking, off camera, but like it's a lot of people don't get to experience these components of it. Because of the fact that it's not what they do. It's the reason why we want fans, because it's supposed to be an escape. We are an entertainment, while simultaneously the lack of understanding goes, there's a reason why this is a machine and not just a breeze of air that just happens. Like, these things don't just happen. There's this process, and what happens in that process is people have to put everything in there, and it hence blocks them out from doing that. Even actually to your point, I remember whenever my friend and we did the documentary Singapore to Tokyo, any way we can, check it out. But when we were doing the documentary and we'd finished doing the commercials and we started putting out ads for it, and one of the comments that were on there was like, man, look at this. I would love to get paid to do this. Must be nice to get paid. And I was sitting there laughing because I was like, yeah, when you buy this, yeah, it'll be nice. But your comment by itself didn't really mean anything except for you have a assumption that these things just occur.
Right. And we talked about this last week, which both you and I have a hard time. And I'm sure a lot of people, but about how using the term lucky
Right.
When people say, "Oh, you're so lucky," it's like, no, I worked really hard to make that happen. Like to go from Singapore to Tokyo, and didn't just get lucky and
Right.
say, "Oh, let me just take my bike." Like, I did that because I put the work in, I put the effort, and I made that happen. And
the outcome that came with it. Exactly. Hey guys, I just want to take a quick moment to talk to you about the Rugby Outlet Mall. Now, I know you guys have heard me talk about this many times in the show before, typically in the intro, but I wanted to really make sure to get your focus on it because the Rugby Outlet Mall is not just the commerce hub for GiftTime Rugby, but it is an area where we want to be able to create the movement and the symbolic elements that add to the movement. The Rugby Outlet Mall is here so that we can have something that not just to have for the field, but more importantly to be able to have as a regular lifestyle. Because as you know, rugby is not just a sport. It's a whole way of life. It is a movement. And we have everything moving from cultural to your pop culture items like our Rugby Zon shirts and sweaters, as well as representing for the culture as we continue to develop the HBCU Rugby Classic. And we want to continue to support these things because it only grows the sport overall. We are continually growing to be able to make sure that we're connecting with you on a personal level as well as a rugby level. And for you guys that are listening to the podcast and listening to this show, want to let you know that you are going to get 20% off all gear that is under the category of GiftTime Rugby Network and the HBCU Rugby Classic. That is basically the entire store. And all you need to use is promo code GROWRUGBY, GREAUX Rugby. And with that, you guys will get 20% off any clothing that is in the store as of right now. And of course, we're always building up more and more each time. But we want to make sure that you are able to symbolize your rugby faithfulness to the rest of the world and let them know that there is an opportunity to be able to develop, to grow, and to get better each and every time in this sport. So guys, I hope you guys check it out. Definitely go, and you guys can go to www.rugbyoutletmall.com. That is rugbyoutletmall.com. Guys, you're not going to want to miss one bit of this. Now let's get back to it. Exactly. It's so true. But, kind of speaking into perception, it also goes into what we look for from our teams. I talked with just talked recently with Katie Sadler with World Rugby, and I talked with a few other people. But we have such a perception of what it is to also be of what's expected from World Rugby. For you understood it as terms of our teams. Being inside that room and understanding, getting to understand personalities and stuff, and speak within the specific range, no names or anything like that. But I asked.
Oh, don't worry, I don't. I can't get it out of me.
Yeah, but I asked more of the factor of when you hear about how people perceive the ease of how USA Rugby does, or World Rugby does, or RFU does, and you get to actually meet some of these people, do you feel like there's there's been any accurate representation for what the general public will feel versus what the reality is itself?
I mean, that's hard because I don't know what as I was just saying, I try to stay away because I get very defensive because I know how hard these people work. So, it's very different. Like you said, once you start, when you start commentating and you start knowing the people, then it's very hard to criticize. Like when you see people crying or upset because their careers are ending, and it's the end of a World Cup and their careers are coming to an end, and you sit there and see how hard they're working and that they're not getting what they deserve. It's hard to hear people criticize their actions because what they're going through. I also think it's really interesting because it's also perception. I think no matter who you are, you know, Tiff and I were talking about this the other day, like your stress is your stress. So there's a perception of the US that a lot of people say that we have like a ton of money. And when I tell people, I'm like, no, like my favorite is that Samu Manoa and 15s used to call our per diem our Taco Bell money. You know, because like, you know, he worked his ass off to get where he was with Toulon, and you know, he made good money then, and now he's such a great human being. He's back, you know, being a bricklayer, which is what he's good at. But what we got paid for the US, literally, he's like, I mean, literally once I took him to Taco Bell and he spent $60, which I don't know how you could spend $60 at Taco Bell, but the
those supreme burritos, man.
The money is not there, but like, you know, people, you know, the French team or the South African team, you know, they have this perception that we get more, and you know, we're still a tier 2 nation, so we complain that like we don't get the same treatment that in sevens that New Zealand or Australia does. But then they say the same thing. Like everybody has their own story, a version of like, well, you know, oh, they got a better flight time, or they got a better this, or they got a better that. And it's, you know, for everybody, it's true for them, you know, because that's their truth and that's their perception, you know, whether or not Kenya gets, you know, this or that. But so it's hard to say because you don't know the reality. And that's why I try not to criticize, is because like, yeah, we think, you know, New Zealand does really well, and so they have all of this, but like their perception is a lot different. And when you're in it, it is different, and it is real to you, you know.
No, and that's what I feel like always needs to be reminded. And it's like, look, this isn't where we just said before. It's not easy. This isn't something that just again, it doesn't just occur. It's a factor that there are real processes that go through, and even though we've used the word perception a lot, and it's going to be the word of the day for today, but you know, it is that idea of like, everything seems exaggerated comparatively, simply because of the expectations that are being put on it. So every kit, every food bit, every service, like whatever, always seems like, oh, you're absolutely having to get the best. But the reality is like that best had to come from something, which means you're probably not always getting the best out of it.
Yeah, you know, and I mean, you know, and at one point, you know, England, like we always say, like they're the richest rugby union, and you know, they might have more than say Fiji. But as we're just talking about, like, you know, reading a book about the Olympics, and they were saying how, you know, I mean, all of the housing in Rio was horrible. You know, it's what they said in the news. I mean, I said my room, like we shared like these kind of condo apartments, and my room was off of the kitchen. There was no mirrors. Like there was plastic over the window. You know, you didn't have a lot of provisions. The Athletes Village had like a McDonald's, but you know, Fiji's saying how bad, and Australia was saying how bad their living conditions were, and I'm like, that's exactly how ours were.
Right.
We saw the U.S. come out in the Ralph Lauren, you know, and maybe for the basketball players that stayed, you know, on a boat outside of it, but for the most part, you know. I don't know about the tennis players, but like we did not have, you know, yeah, okay, maybe our clothing was pretty cool.
Like, well, let me be real, eh?
Yeah, but you know, we ate at the same dining halls that, like, you know, didn't have the greatest food, and again, I mean, the places we stayed were not that great at all. But the perception is, you know, like, oh well, U.S. had it like so much better than we did,
right?
And which isn't true.
Everything that glitters isn't gold, and just because you see a shiny house doesn't mean the inside is fully built in.
Right. Yeah. Again, our clothing was pretty cool.
It's just like, but they did hook us up. We got the swag. So we'll give you guys that. We'll let you have that one part. Right. No. Wanted to kind of talk, especially when you picked up on the Olympics and Rugby World Cup. Obviously, you have been through at least 3 Rugby World Cups, and
I worked at 2.
You worked at 2, and then the Olympics as well.
Yeah.
So for you, again, I love talking about experiences when it comes into it. You had been working with teams on just regular games, right? You have your 4-year round of just normal games. Is the experience of getting players ready for a normal test match different than, or is there a different vibe in the air than it is going into a Rugby World Cup match?
I don't think so. Again, the players might say differently, but I think the first coach I worked with, Scott Johnson, who I loved, I think we talked about him a little bit. He's Australian, and then he was the director of rugby at Scotland. And Eddie O'Sullivan, they both said no other country would put up with what we put up with. So we had such limited resources that, yes, at World Cups we were given a little bit more, but we still were going into it. Like somebody was criticizing our All Blacks match, and I was like, people got in like 4 days before that. So we're flying in from all over. We had like 4 training sessions. I mean, we're playing the best team in the world. Like, what do you expect? Like, they're still, getting to know who's on their team at that point. Like, let alone like talk about strategy.
You're talking about the All Blacks match 2014.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at World Cups, the only thing I say advantage is that we've been together, because part of being a tier 2 nation, now they have a lot more test matches, which is great. Before we had, June tests and November tests. So we get this momentum going, and then you say, okay, see you in 4 months. And at that time there was no pro rugby here. So we wanted as many people overseas as possible. So, and then we come back and you start from scratch, or we get a new coach. So we'd be constantly starting over. So World Cups, we got the luxury of being together for a longer amount of time, but you also got the stress of being on the road for months in hotel rooms away from your families, doing the same thing in and out, having no personal space. So again, the New Zealand World Cup in 2011 was very, very special. I was not at the 2007. I mean, I can imagine it was great being in Paris. I think they shut the Eiffel Tower down for them. But New Zealand was such a great host, and they just made you feel so special. And I remember playing Australia in Wellington, and so of course everybody in New Zealand was cheering for us.
Right.
And that was a really special moment, because we're not used to playing in packed stadiums like that and having everybody cheer for us. And also that was our first match was against Ireland, and it was the 10th anniversary of 9/11. So there was a lot of special elements that I didn't think would play into it. Like the 9/11, we were supposed to go to this church ceremony for 2 hours on the game of our first World Cup match, and so high performance wise, we're like, really, this is absurd. Like,
right. So many places.
We're playing Ireland, which it was a big thing because Eddie O'Sullivan was our coach, and he was criticized a lot because of his experiences with Ireland. So there's all this pressure coming up to it, and you want us to go to a church ceremony for 2 hours? But I mean, it turned out being an amazing experience, and it was very powerful. But yeah, I mean, there's certain things. So long-winded version. No, I mean, I think to say you have to treat every match like
it's the most important.
It's the same, because we have so few that does mean something to you. And for a lot of these people, you never know. That's the last time you could be playing and putting that jersey on. Right. So most people, I haven't seen many people take it lightly. For the most part, it's a very somber, in 15s, very moving experiences, and jersey ceremonies were very moving. Interesting in sevens because we would have so many jersey ceremonies. It's a little less formal.
Right.
And I would come, and to me, we get dressed up and wear khakis, or I started wearing a skirt after a while, and put on our polos, our number ones, and it was very special to see people getting their jerseys, and because in 15s there weren't that many matches. Sevens, you'll be playing in Australia and playing New Zealand next week, and then next month you'll be playing. So you have 10 series on the 10 stops on the series, and there's less of you, and you're doing it in your hotel room. So every once in a while we have a very special jersey presentation, but they would make fun of me because I would come in and just because I was wearing all the same thing. I had like an Eagles belt buckle and this like bone carving of an eagle, just because I needed something.
You need to have your own ceremony to be part of this as well too.
Chris Brown would make fun of me because for jersey ceremonies for sevens, and we'd be doing it in our hotel room because all the teams are in it. You don't have extra space,
right?
And I'd still get dressed up for it because to me it was really, really special. And they're just like, Sarah, this is a 10-minute thing we're doing, or New Zealand would always make fun of me in locker rooms because like we taught Mike Fred and we taught everyone like and all of our liaisons like how to take the flag down and fold it properly because that's our culture. New Zealand has a lot of different cultural things that they can
kind of touch on,
go to, and for us it's the flag. So they'd be like, Sarah, we watch you every week taking down this flag. They're like, we would just take it down because to them, and it's not a criticism, the flag doesn't represent the same kind of thing.
Right.
And it's all about intent and meaning. So it's not that they're being disrespectful.
No.
It's just they have their own cultural things that are important for us. We have so many different cultures. It's the flag, and not to get into a debate about like anthems and that kind of stuff. But the anthem never really meant anything to me until I started going to test matches.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the actual song or the meaning or whatever, but for these men and women to represent your country, because you're always representing your country. You're not just representing Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Louisiana. To have that achievement is such a big honor that, as I said, like I would cry. And again, it's they could be singing like Win Dixie. I don't know. Like it doesn't matter that it was the national anthem, but that moment, it was just so special. And I remember going back to we had an Australian scrum half that started, and when we played Australia at the World Cup, and I asked him, I was like, is it weird for you to be singing, against, because he had friends on the team as well, like against Australia. And he was like, this is my country. This is my team. Like I'm playing for America. And, so it's always really hit home, and anthems, that moment, again, doesn't matter what it is, of representing your country, has always been one of the most special things to me. And in sevens, you don't do it before the match, because that would just
take forever. You have like 30 of those happening at a time. Well,
yeah.
No. I like that. It kind of speaks to the vibe. And I think there's so much that goes into the vibe of what you do within a match, from like what you do as your tradition, like you said, with getting dressed and coming with your necklace for the jersey ceremony, to what it feels like just being on the field, or what it feels like having this amount of crowd just kind of yelling. And that's all that energy that you feel coming down at you. And it's a very intoxicating feeling to have those.
It's funny. In my club days, one of my favorite things is that I used to always get to the pitch early, and I loved. We have Brandywine's kind of out in the suburb countries, but we had a beautiful pitch that was on a horse farm. So I loved just sitting there and watching the pitch being empty. So like part of my job was setting up locker rooms. So I love the fact that I got to stadiums early and we would set it up, and I got to be there when nobody, people were just setting up. Like that was kind of like my turn it on moment. It was just a special thing. And you and Tiff talked about it in her thing too, about her in the anthem. And you know, her being from New Zealand, but her teammates belting it out and how powerful that was to her. So again, I'm not trying to make it political, but it's that moment. It's
exactly,
you know, it's when you turn the switch, whatever it may be, that is so special and unique. And again, it's like you're representing your country every time you do that, which is just such a special thing.
No, but that's, I think, even without it, whether it was political, whether it's in a guise of politics or not, it's that exact same feeling. It's what is it that you have the expectation of what it represents for yourself, and
it's
being able
interpretation.
Exactly.
You know, the flag's important to us. It's not necessarily, you know, important to other people. Like,
exactly.
Taking your hat off when we sing is a tradition that we do. I was at the World Cup last year in Australia, and they weren't being disrespectful. They don't. It's just not a thing that they do. You know? Right.
You know, and I think it even comes in, and I always ask this because you pointed this out, is I always wonder when we put traditionalism versus purism kind of thing. So like within rugby, the perfect example is with drinking and alcohol. You know, culturally, that is a central component of rugby. But we have to always ask ourselves at the same time, like, where are we trying to go with it as a sport? I talked about this with Tozan several times on podcasts and off of it. And I've talked with several people, but you know, it always asks, like, where is it that we're trying to move forward to? How much of it do we want to stick with the tradition of what rugby has to offer, or do we stick with the purism of it and try and get the intent and adjust what the culture is? And for me, where I stand is much more of the ilk of rugby is always having to be an evolving sport. The framework of it is always going to be based in the social aspect, and I think it's by far the strongest component of it, even more so than what it does on the pitch. But in doing so and being so widespread, you have to also now start taking in the characteristics of what it means to have multiple cultural perspectives of the same structure. So it removes some of that traditionalism away from it, and adds to it. So I want to ask you, for you, as you've been able to see all the aspects, you've been able to see the roundedness of it, do you feel like there is room for rugby to maintain its core self while adding new elements that weren't introduced before? Or do you think where a lot of people will find themselves in really working hard to maintain a lot of the traditions that go along with it for the sake of calling it rugby as we know it?
I mean, I guess that depends, because I don't know what you define as like what it's, you know, the core self of it. Because I think, you know, say you're talking about a 15s, you know, premiership match. You know, when they come over, a lot of the premiership people, it's, you know, they like to get dressed up in suits and they go out to the pub and talk about the match. And because of the nature of 15's match, because it's long, you know, you're not having fancy dress in the stadium.
Right.
You know, the World Cup last year was the first time when I went to the quarterfinals, like, you know, saw 4 different nations watching a game, which was cool to me because it was a little bit more like sevens. So yeah, that's part of the element. You know, being around so many different countries, a lot of my friends from different countries will say it's interesting to hear what they think of what's American, like marching bands. They think marching bands are very American. I'm like, oh, okay. You know, I mean, Disney World, like all this stuff. But tailgating, I guess, is a very American thing to do. So I think, you know, I think we've tried to do a lot of like what England and Europe do.
Yeah.
Which I think is a little stuffy for Americans. Sevens, you know, I love the model of it, and I think it should be highlighted more. But for 15s, sevens, you can't really have a fan fest. And I talked to a friend about this who does a lot of hospitality, and I was like, you can have the greatest fan fest at 15s match, and it's the same people watching, but it's a different atmosphere because you're not having these 14-minute matches that go down to the last second. So you need to give them a good place to hang out and talk about the match, because that's what they want to do. In seven, you can watch 30 amazing matches in a weekend. So you can watch a couple and then stop, go outside and, do all of this and whatever. So I think the MLR is in a really special place because I don't think it's been developed yet. I think the culture is there to somewhat develop. And as you said, the US, I'll talk about in sevens right now, our team is made up of what America represents. It's so diverse, which is wonderful. But with that, you have all these different cultures. 15s, it's easier. There are more traditions. And again, I'm just talking about my experience, not how it is now or whatever. But, the Tolkien especially, I would put up past pictures of past players, in our physio room, in our team room. We tried to, there'd be a little bit more time to keep traditions. In sevens, our boys are from and women are from all over. And there's just not, there's so many different cultures that you have to encompass, which is, again, beautiful, but very hard to take in and coach, number one, but also make traditions. Right. Because so many, they all have their different traditions. So I think it needs to be a hybrid. I think it's something that needs to be developed, and we just haven't necessarily developed yet. And part of the problem too is a lot of club teams have their own traditions, which they think should morph into
the typical
someone else. But what you do on the East Coast might not be what you do in California. And again, that's the beauty of America, but that's also the difficulty of it.
Simultaneously.
It is. And we talked about this last week about, I hate when people say, oh, they're not American, or, this person isn't American. Because I said, well, what makes them American? Legally, yeah, they are. But some people that you don't consider an American, they played for their country. How can you say that they're not American? Right now, I want to get out of this country. I don't want to be anywhere else. So somebody that takes more pride for playing for their country, I don't know. I just don't think you can define, because that's what we were built on is diversity. And so I don't think you can say, oh, they're not American, or this person isn't American, or, we had a women's coach who wasn't, I don't know where he was born, but isn't quote American, but people have accepted him as, and so why is it okay for him but not okay for this person?
Right.
And
again, perception on that. Word of the day. But I know I love what you're saying on that, because for me it's the same, where we work so hard, and especially I think in this era of rugby, where now you are able to have more of a chance to express yourself, because I think it's stepping outside of that European variation of how rugby should be microscopically seen.
I mean, in sevens, I think I told you that's in the beginning, it was funny because, Mike, Friday's English, but I would say he's more American than a lot of the American coaches we've had, and which is why the English think he had a reputation of being very feisty on the sidelines, and he would always step out of the box. And that that was part of my job, was to keep him in the box. And the head referee, they'd be like, Sarah, and I'd be like, Mike, just stop stepping over the line. Mike embraces individuality, and he's worked really hard to allow again, talking about the men's team, try to embrace their culture and who they are, and how but keep them as one unit. But when we would be in the tunnel, for example, and this is what we're talking about, marketing, so as rugby players, we're taught it's in us that we're pretty humble. Like, you don't showboat, you don't,
Right.
you score a try and like, you're like, oh, New Zealand, they score a try and they go. And because that's your job. So when I watch football, I'm like, what are they celebrating? They get paid to do that. Like you should catch the ball. Like, why, like every time you make a tackle, like, yeah, that's your job to do that. But so in the tunnel, when we would have like, some of our guys that played American football, like, and, I'll say like people like Perry, who's just like, he just lights up a room when he's happy, which is most of the time. Like just when he takes his hoodie off and he just smiles and you just can't help it. And he'll dance around. So, most other countries stand very quietly and the rest very quietly in the tunnel as they're going out. And at one point we had like Carlin and Perry and, like Nate Ebner and Kevin Swear and like all these guys that played football, and they were just like, and the referees would like look at me and I'd be like, like, because they'd be like, come on, man, and they'd be like pumping each other up, and it was like, to me, it was just, but it was so funny because everybody's like,
what's going on? What do you guys do?
Like, you shake, the guys are sitting there shaking hands, like they make sure that they, you go in the tunnel together, you give them space, like you're saying, they're not talking shit to each other, but like, and now they love it. But in the beginning, it would just be so funny because the referees would just be like, what is going on? And yeah, and I mean, we were loud. Like we were definitely loud. Like in the meal rooms where we bring attention.
That's where you go. That's the American thing. We're loud. There we go. At least we will bring the attention on ourselves, but it's with purpose.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, this is just the break train sending out a personal little video diary to all you people out there, where I am going to document me riding most of the way between Singapore and Tokyo for the 2019 Rugby World Cup. Number one is because it's part of my business. I do Rugby Lovers Guide to Asia. Number two is I want to bring a lot of exposure to the rugby clubs and the rugby NGOs and charities. Also, on a personal level, I just want to break the funk I've kind of felt I've been into for the last 10 years.
So for the next 12 months, I poured myself into the Singapore to Tokyo campaign, but it still wasn't enough. I needed help, and it came from Louisiana.
We in Singapore, baby!
Gift from GiftTime Rugby USA is a extroverted tour de force.
Say hi to my people out there.
Which makes up for my social shortcomings.
This place is unbelievable. It's not just it's like
what's he supposed to do?
Morons, a bunch of morons.
Guys, picture with me. Picture. Australian. G'day, mate. You can use my phone. But what unites us is a hunger for adventure.
Off to KL, Kuala Lumpur.
Gift, where are we?
We're in
Mount Fuji, baby!
Our love of Asian rugby culture.
1, 2, 3, center!
Rugby is starting to develop here in Cambodia for women as well.
Valkyries, the mighty, mighty Valkyries!
And allows us to overcome incredible obstacles.
It's just got so thick. It's just so thick here. Now it's pouring down rain again.
But coming to this Thai-Cambodia border has renewed all the aggression.
So the whole thing's gone buggered. I got hit.
What?
I got tail-ended by a motorbike.
I just feel that knee, that ankle just going in all the wrong directions under the weight of my body. But that doesn't compare to the pain of failure.
I'm dying. Oh, I'm dying.
And that's what I've been worried about this whole time. We're out here, we're running out of energy, we're running out of money, and we're feeling isolated. And yet at that critical moment, friends, family, sometimes complete strangers come on board. Before you know it, we're back in the game.
Tokyo, here we come!
Making a comeback. 4 weeks, 2,300 miles,
5 countries.
After all the trials and tribulations, this ride had become deeply personal. All that mattered now was getting to that Rugby World Cup game in Tokyo.
Yeah, buddy. All right. Be easy.
Go check out redearthfilms.vhx.tv to get your copy of Singapore to Tokyo any way you can. That's redearthfilms.vhx.tv. No, that's real, and and that's exactly it. It's how to be able to express yourself through the sport without distracting the sport from what its intent is, because it is capable of doing it all, and we see it. I mean, clearly, New Zealand, I feel, has always been leading the way in it, but it just happened to be that they were the most well-known of that, and it seemed to be the exception. But I think now we're hearing it, and especially after this pandemic where everything got very weakened, that now it's like you kind of have to allow this. Like, what is the difference? It's different than it was in 95. 95 is different than it was in the 70s. 70s is different than, it was in the 1800s. So like you express it, but this is that era of just adding to the culture. And I love kind of what 2020 had brought in terms of that, in forcing some of these things to get exposed and to push them up so that they can be discussed and they can be presented and allowed.
Well, I think things are also evolving, like, number one, because of social media.
Right.
And I was listening to a podcast, and I told you, I was I was lucky enough to be at the final of the South Africa England, at the Japan World Cup, which again was one of the most moving experiences of my life. And just to hear him speak, and so I was listening to a podcast, and how he was saying that he has this platform, and he was given this platform, and now athletes, are celebrities. Where before, like, I just saw, I'm forgetting her name, but the tennis player that Louis Vuitton just signed as, like,
Osaka.
Osaka. Yeah. Because of, which other athletes have before, but if you're given an opportunity, it's like you kind of now have to take it. And with social media and the fact that our athletes aren't making any money, so they have to use that to survive if they want to have any longevity in this sport. Right now, you have to use yourself as a platform, which I think is a great thing. Like Nia Tapper, I love the fact, like, that's
the homie right there.
Always by, Perry, I'm number one fan, obviously. And and on my website, I put his stuff on there, and like Nia, I try to, I buy her stuff, and I love the fact because Nia is one of the only athletes right now, because when you're so focused as an athlete, you don't have time to think about marketing yourself, and you don't have the money to have an agent to do that for you. And again, it's still not really in the culture of our sport, but she's just really great at it because she's marketing herself now, which is wonderful, in a great way. And she's not showboating, she's not whatever, but she's looking, she's calling herself an entrepreneur, because she is, and she's making steps and branding herself, and because she has, a lot of amazing dreams and goals. But I think it's wonderful because, and part of that is, she has time because of the pandemic to do that. But, she's just a special person anyway. But it's hard for athletes to do that because you're so focused. You can't be thinking about, like,
what can you do over here and
like Carlin with Red Bull, it's always so hard because, like, he'd want me to bring, like, a Red Bull out at halftime, but you can't, because you can't, like, it's sponsorship, is a big thing. And, but so you can get sponsors, but there's also only so much television time and so much time that you're on. And if it's a conflicting sponsor or, you can't use that either.
Right.
But yeah, I think, as you said, it's evolving, but I think now athletes are, they are celebrities, more so than just actors and actresses, going out and endorsing and using their voice. Like, athletes can now do this, which is different than how it was in the past.
Agreed, and it's one area. I mean, it's one I'm so that's very near and dear to my heart on that. Naya is a perfect example, and it's one of the reasons why I think she's is just absolutely amazing, and that's on multiple levels. But it's also because of the fact that I love the innovation of it, because it's easy to keep bypassing it. Like that's it. There's plenty of reasons to not try and go after something more because your schedule just doesn't allow. But whenever she's stepping out into it, and I'll even say even she was doing it before the pandemic. Pandemic kind of gave a little bit more opening, but she was already setting herself up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But it's interesting because, you know, my business partner, my friend Allie, and I realized this a couple of years ago because a lot of my friends would come to me, and a lot of, I mean, I have no idea why, but a lot of international players would be like, oh, Sarah, you know, will you help me get in touch with this person? Or, they want to come to the States and play. But a lot of the U.S. players, I realized, you know, if they were switching teams or whatever, like they didn't have rugby resumes and I realized because they never had to have one.
Right.
You know who the good players are. You didn't have to go in, but now we have other people coming in, so you have to give them something. And like with Naya, you know, and Perry, like, you know, Perry has his PB11 website, and he has his camps. But I was looking up athletes' website, and not many athletes have their own websites. I mean, social media is basically a website now, but they don't have something to promote themselves. I think like Todd used to have one years ago, and now with his foundation he does. But like, you know, they don't have a place to put all of their articles and their, you know, and their pictures and stuff. So we're trying to figure out an affordable way, you know, to do it, because these people don't have money to do it, but an affordable way to make a website where you can basically, you know, it's a virtual resume, and help them do resumes for themselves.
And that's where I was going to ask you about TORI Rugby as well. So I guess this is as natural transition into it. Considering everything that you've been doing, you started working on this project last year, which is TORI, which is the original Influencer Rugby, one of the best names. I'm not even gonna lie, it rolls off the tongue so well. You know, can you kind of talk a little bit about what you and Allie have been trying to work on with that?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I kind of the name. I hate the word influencer, but it was actually a year ago that my friend Rob from Vegas, he was like writing an email, and so we're going to the MLR event in Vegas, and he was saying like, oh, this is, you know, my good friend Sarah, and she's like an influencer. And I was like, Rob, what do I sell things on Instagram? Like, you know, and I was trying to, this one of the people I respect the most is this analyst, Ashley Everett from South Africa. And I just love South Africa's sevens team. To me, the way everything they do and the way that they're run is so professional, and I love all of their staff. And so Ashley, I always kind of is like, he's my sounding board. And I'll ask him like, what should I do about this? What should I do about that? Because, you know, it's been a rough transition the last 2 years, and not working with teams, and my identity has kind of gone a little bit, and I still want to be in high performance, and there's, you know, only so many jobs out there.
Right.
I've been in the background for so long, I'm not used to promoting myself. So I was like, you know, and I do massage and body work and yoga, but, you know, I became a manager, and I really love doing that. And like you, I really, really love promoting people. I take a lot of photographs. Like I want to highlight the special things people are doing, but I've also studied a lot of like nutrition and all these different elements, and like the elite athlete well-being stuff that I'm doing that I love. And it takes all of these elements. So I'm like, how do I, you know, I'm all over the place with what I do. And he's like, Sarah, that's okay. He's like, it's okay that you could be. So I was like, I want to do a website. So I'm not like, okay, here, you wanted some photographs? Here's a business card for that. You want some massage? So to kind of encompass everything that I do. So it started off as like a virtual website. And then I realized, you know, I didn't want it to be like anything with the word rugger or anything,
cliche,
whatever. So I wanted to showcase, also to have a place where people, that voices don't always get heard, because, you know, even at the OTC, they talk about the food pyramid, you know, which is just old school, or the way people, think about conditioning or lifting. So like, I know all of these wonderful, amazing people, necessarily get heard because they're younger or people don't want to listen to that. So I wanted to have a platform where, number one, you could promote athletes, but also promoting these people and saying like, Tiff and her coaching style, or, Les Spellman and his, his work with speed, and say like, hey, here are the new ways of thinking about things. Like, like, hey, we lift in lineouts now, like it's not back in the day. But it's not to say like the way you're thinking is wrong, or the way that you're conditioning, or, if your training's old school, but like to say, hey, here are options. Right. So, here I want to give you resources of people that I've met along the way and think are brilliant, and give them a platform. And then you can decide. You don't, I'm not like, I didn't want to say this is right or this is wrong, because the way you should be eating is very different from the way I should be eating. And, I've done everything from intermittent fasting to, I've studied all about, different nutrition. I'm very big into gut health, but that doesn't mean it's right for somebody else.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure like that I'm not telling you this is it. Like, you can decide what's best for you, but I want these voices heard, and also I want to showcase, as we talked about, the good things that athletes are doing.
Exactly.
And not talk negatively about them, and make them human, and make a very big into personal connection. Because once you make that personal connection, it's a beautiful thing. These people are doing, they're creating role models. Like 2 years ago was the first time I had friends that, rugby players that married rugby players, and their kids were saying, like, one, for example, was like, Sarah, can you get me Perry's autograph? Called me on tour, and she was like, I was so excited. I think her son Brett was like 8 at the time. Like, Brett scored his first try, but I was more proud of the fact that he centered it. And when I asked him, I said, Brett, why did you center the ball? And he goes, well, that's what Perry Baker would do. And I was like, oh, and it was so cute. And I showed Perry, and we happened to be on tour, and I showed Mike, and Mike was like, no, we wouldn't, but which was really funny. I mean, but it was right before, and then I brought them to CRC, so he actually got to meet Brett because they were from around Philadelphia, and he asked this. He's 8, and he asked this great question of like, well, so what do you do when they try to corner Perry like defensively? Like, that's a brilliant question. But it's just the fact that he said like that was his role model, and that was his answer, was because that's what Perry would do. And people are the same way with Madison. They'd be like, and the fact that these kids growing up have these role models and are doing things because that's what they are seeing. And as we talked about, I'm very big in, you have to see something to know what you want. You don't know what you don't know. So if you don't have a goal, if you don't have, a Naya Tapper, an Alev, a Phaedra, if you don't have something to achieve, even if you don't want to be an Olympian, if you don't have something out there to look up to,
right,
as a role model, either just as a role model or as, physically, if you want to be like Danny Barrett or anything like that, like, then you don't know what's there. The same thing, like I didn't know till after college that there was higher level rugby. I didn't have a role model, for me working as a woman in men's rugby, I had no one to go to say like, what do I do about this? There were a few women, I'm not the first.
But there
was 4 other women, one from Canada, one from Australia, and it was great because I could talk to them, and I had some people to sound off,
That's creating the community in that aspect, but you're still creating the blueprint early on and continuing to create that blueprint even after the fact, so that when that next generation kicks in, it's able to, there's at least something to be able to pull from
Right. So, I say influencer, but it's more if you look at, like, I'm very big into definitions and meanings of things. So like to influence, so to have an effect on your thoughts or feelings.
Right.
So, so again, if it's, wearing Perry's sweatshirt, which I wear all the time anyway, but, Perry doesn't need my help promoting him, but I think it's a great thing to just support the great thing that athletes are doing and just show that. But, we do want to showcase, like, Allie is really great. My partner, we designed our website together, but graphically, she's amazing. Nice. So, like, our little emblem, if you look at, like, the meaning, it's the word, TORI. And because I didn't know what to call it. I'm like, what's that button, you put on Instagram, like the circle, like, what do we call it? So we looked up the meaning. I don't know what's it called.
True. So, actually, I don't know what it's called. Just the profile picture area, I guess.
We kind of we take different meanings of stuff, but that's our totem. So we wanted our meaning to be a manifesto rather than, and then our influencers are the people, like, podcasts that we like, or we're still working on it. So
curating the content and stuff like that. What's the best way of putting this? I hope you appreciate what you guys are working on. Appreciate it even more than what it is in just the vision that you have it, because it's the level of necessity within rugby industry is ridiculous in it. And because even as people start to grow, and I always like to talk about the development of the industry, especially in the US and basically any non-rugby, major rugby country, it becomes more and more difficult for people to filter because there's just too many places to look. There's just too much to be able to look. And the greatest area where there is going to be need is going to be in curation of content at minimum, and that comes into promotion. So the fact that is where it goes and that's part of your process and what you're trying to be able to bring out and help to be able to bring these athletes as well up while also helping to bring audiences into the space is just phenomenal. And it is legitimately a pleasure that you are willing to take that step and make it happen.
Yeah, I'm trying. It's definitely hard, and there's critics on everything. And I told you that a lot of what I love is this elite athlete well-being class that I'm taking, and that's something I really want to get into. But the problem is, like, that, and with all of these things is, like, again, professional rugby is like, we are in infancy basically if we're in terms of an organization. So I've talked to a lot of coaches, about it, and it's great because a lot of the guys that I worked with, these players are now in a position where they're running clubs or coaches, and they know the necessity and they know where they weren't treated well or what could be better. But, the money's still not there to do all of these things. So they're like, that's a great idea. Yeah, we need that. But, we don't have the money for it, or we don't have the staff for it. So this elite athlete well-being is it's this guy, Steve Johnson, out of the Wellbeing Science Institute in Australia. And so what I realized is every other country has well-being experts. Mm-hmm. And it's not holistic, but it's not like yoga, he's a very straight-laced guy, but he deals a lot with rugby league. So everyone in Australia in rugby league is certified this. So and in the class I was taking, and it was a year ago, I went to Loughborough twice because they were only offering in Australia, and I'm like, I can't go there. You have to go 4 weeks, and it's like a 800-hour. It's a full course. It's the only certification in the world for this, but it's taking all of the elements, like what your identity is, like what your strengths are, what's important to you, who you are outside of rugby. Like if it's financial, it's religious, it's not just your physical body, like if it's spirituality. So doing measurable data and taking this in and saying, like, okay, before you're done your career, let's do this at the beginning of your career. Like, and your gut health and your brain health, and he's very big into things are learned behavior, so then you can unlearn them. So taking all these 9 elements, lifestyle, culture. So if we bring a player over that we are aware before they get here what their culture is and what their needs are and what their families are, and the states are so big, it's like, if you're living in New York or in Marietta, Georgia, it's very different. If you have a family, it's a very different. So like taking all of this into account when you bring a player in, and so they know this, and so you're doing it because it's the right thing to do, number one.
Right.
It makes you a better person, right? But it also makes your organization better. And
exactly.
So this guy, Steve, I mean, I was like, oh my God, this is like, I've studied all these things individually. But to hear it in practice and to hear that people actually do this, like
for a living.
Yeah. So all the people in my class, as I said, are Premiership football or soccer players, but they have the money to have this. And so they have measurable data. So you do all of these stats and all of these things to show like where you are right now and like flourishing scales, and then making a well-being plan. And again, it's different for everyone. If you're not religious, that's not it. It's education. If that's your main, then you focus on that. But it's finding out who you are so that when you end your career, you're not just left with nothing, or that you don't just feel like an entity. You don't just feel like, you feel valued in the organization that you're in, and which, then is a return on your investment. So it's great for organizations because you bring in these players, and if you have language lessons set up for them and bank accounts and schools for their kids, you're getting more out of your players than you would be if you didn't do this. And so that's a way to make it tangible and realistic for an organization to actually put it into practice.
And invest.
Premiership football clubs told me that basically, because they pay their guys millions of dollars, that for every day that they don't have their player playing, they're losing about $10,000 a day. I'm like, well, we're not that, but it's the same thing. If somebody has a bad experience because we don't care about their culture and take that their culture is different from ours, and we had to do cultural tests. So like understanding what my culture is as, compared to yours, which would be very different in Louisiana.
Right.
Let alone if you're from Fiji coming into New York City, so understanding this and understanding, so it did a comparison like me as a peer, as a mentor, working for somebody, and how people see things, and just understanding that, and just hearing people and listening to them basically, it's just a wonderful thing. But so even though we're not paying these guys as much money, if we actually care, then it helps with player retention. So then it helps them go back and say, you know what, I was taken care of.
Right.
So other people want to, if they have a bad experience, and again, it's a lot to ask when we're in its infancy, but I think it's so important. And but again, it's a little tough because we don't have the resources, and our healthcare system is different. So what do you do when you discover things? So I can't do everything. I can't be your nutritionist, but that you could ask, but like who's paying for? You realize that you have tendencies to do this because this is what happened. This guy seems very big into early childhood trauma as a cause for that too. But so if you bring that up, who's going
directed to?
You know what I mean? So that's a whole nother element. But I think that there's elements of this that need to be put into practice now. And so I want to do some case studies to show people. And I mean, I don't think we're ready. We can't have a well-being specialist.
Right. But that's the pleasure of being in the US. Like there's even though there's not necessarily the direct connection to be able to put to it, but there's always some ways of being able to utilize the pieces that you can use now to redirect back. So it's like, okay, maybe it's not to the club, but who's somebody who has is a benefactor, who is going to be it's going to be beneficial to try and afford to have this for the players or the workers. And then with that case study, it goes, okay, maybe I can give a little bit of leverage over here while we're developing on this side. And it's just creating the plan and openness for it.
Right.
And
I mean,
that's
why this guy Steve is so great. Like, I would love for, I mean, his plan was to come to the States, and he has been talking to other organizations, and I would love to work for him to come in, because he has all the data and the research about it. And, he works with veterans, he works with the organizations, and he's just such a, he believes in all this, but he has the measurable data, which, is really important for an organization. And again, he's done it. So he says, like, it's really attractive to sponsors too, not to make it into that, but
you got to speak in the language that people are going to be most
right.
Of.
I mean, I think we're at a really good point, because the people that own these clubs are still doing it because they love it.
Right.
And, like I said, a lot of the players are in positions of power now that know how the system was before. And, it's a lot of money to have these clubs. It's still not NFL money. So it's great. It's a great point to start bringing this in. But again, there has to be an ROI. Like, they have to see that it's worth having this, and it's funny because, I did this before the pandemic started, and then so I couldn't, finish out my course. So I'm still getting certified. And again, I'm going to be the first person, I mean, if I get certified, in North America that's ever taken this class and be certified, which is really cool.
Trailblazing. This is part of the pioneering. Pioneer in the well-being management, pioneer in the sport, pioneer. I mean, but somebody has to do it. I'm always a big believer. If somebody has to do it, why not me? Right, exactly.
I mean, I took this saying, like, even if I get out of rugby, like, it's everything I believe in, number one anyway. And, if I had to go work in a different sport or an organization, I mean, it's all this, the same principles.
Right.
But, it's just interesting now, because now everybody, obviously, because of the pandemic, is talking about well-being.
Mental health.
Right, which is a good time to, so I wish we could introduce, but it's just, again, everybody's all over the place. You don't, nobody's organized enough, and everything's changing from day to day, but it's something that we do need. And I think for the organization to move forward, and the MLR, and especially because we are so diverse,
right?
Again, which is the beauty and a curse, to bring people over, or even, someone say playing in Utah as someone playing in LA. I mean, it's a very different feel. And if you just make people feel heard, and again, not just feel like they're a number, and if they get injured, that they're being, that they're going to get thrown out, is a really important thing, because if you feel valued, then you're going to perform that much better.
Exactly. You're going to give more and find any ways to be able to do that. I mean, it's interaction 101, but ironically, it's one that is still in such need of being developed.
Yeah, and it's funny, and it's not to say that people like Phil Greening and Mike Friday, and like, again, I'm just using them because those are the guys I worked with last. Like, they do a lot of these elements individually, and like, on every team I've been on, everybody's done these kind of individually, because they do care about their players, but it's never been a tangible, measurable,
data piece that's
all put together. Like,
right.
Phil is really, like, we always talk about gut health, and he fasts in the morning, and it's funny because he played for England and for the Wasps, and people think of him as this meathead, and now he's a pescatarian, and he fasts in the morning, and he drinks his coconut oil, and he's just wonderful. But he understands the importance of gut health and brain health and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying teams aren't doing these things, but this just encompasses it all into one. And again, most importantly, gives you measurable data so that you can come back mid-season, the end of the season, and say, okay, this is where you were here. And it also, allows you to find out what your strengths are, because you do a lot of characters,
like
assign the strengths to find out what your strengths are, so you can say, okay, what else am I interested? Because it's something that I struggled with when I hurt my knee. And coaches said that to me, and still not working in rugby, like my identity. I mean, I went through it after routing, and that's all I ever thought about. I had no idea what I wanted to do, because when I was young, that was my dream. So when I decided to stop, I was like, well, now what? And then my identity for so long, even though, I preach against it and saying it, is like, I still say I'm a rugby player, even though I haven't played in 10 years, but that's what I identify with, because I identify with the values and everything about it. And being on that team, and I love traveling, and I love the diversity, and I love all the different cultures, and I love talking with the Kenyans, and I love talking with the South Africans, and that, it's such a unique experience. But like, my identity right now, especially during the pandemic, is like, I'm used to traveling, and even if it's not for rugby, like, I need that cultural aspect of it. Right. So I have not been in one place for this long, like in one state, and I've even gone like 1 or 2 places, but in like two decades, like, because I crave that. Like, I always will want to travel and learn. Like, I should have been in Africa right now, like, but yeah, so it's one thing to stay, but it's very hard to have an identity outside of that. Sorry.
No, finish what you were saying. I'm sorry.
No, especially because you do have to give up so much to, like, all of my friends, they're all doctors and lawyers, and like, my friends, when they played in World Cups, I think, Lara just started getting paid, like, I mean, now it's probably like 10 years ago, but, I shouldn't get paid, per diems, like, so you're giving up so much to
actually achieve
sport that you do have to. I mean, that does become your identity.
Fact. But that's the realness, and I think that's where we always end up having to find out how to find these alternative routes. It's never going to always be the same, but we're not. It's not. I don't always think it's the physical action, but it's the feeling that we still receive from that we always want to get back to. Whether from playing, or whether it's doing stuff outside of the pitch, or whether it's being in proximity to the pitch. Like, one way or another, the feeling of being a part of something that's bigger than self typically ends up being what we aim for.
Right. And as we were talking about, I think it's, I really want to do a lot with our alumni, because I think, number one, they're the biggest fans of rugby. And when you stop playing, if you're not a coach or a referee, maybe an announcer, like, what do you do? So you've spent 20 years of your life making a national team, playing for your country, and then a new coach comes in, and you might get remembered, but then where's your identity? And you want to get back to the game, but if you're not coaching, you're an admin, there's only so many people that can do that or afford to do it. Like, what do you do? And so you do, like, we're all competitive, obviously. Like, we all need that rush, or that adrenaline, or need that outlet to do something.
No, agreed. Yo, Sarah, we're gonna keep having this conversation, but I'm gonna let the listeners have to wait for next time, because I'm gonna keep this part selfishly for myself. But I wanted to kind of go. Ask you, where can people find more about TORI Rugby and what you're trying to start doing?
Well, again, we're still evolving it, and I kind of took a break from a little bit because, but it's TORI, TORI, rugby.com. And so we're on Facebook and Instagram, and we have a beautiful website that Ali and I designed. And so, yeah, again, we're using it as a platform for people. So if anybody wants to be on it, and we want to highlight everybody. So we're still evolving what it's going to do, like, I want Allie to do websites for athletes that are affordable because she's so good at doing it, and I think it's a need. And I actually did some for some of the Kenyan players.
Nice.
But again, it's just money and time and all of that. So,
'tis the name of the game.
But I'm around because we're not going anywhere.
Moving around hopefully soon.
Yeah.
But no, Sarah, thank you so much for just doing this. And I mean, it's even off this has been amazing, and continue on that one.
I know. Well, we've got plans now. We've got projects, and we're roping Tiff into them, and we've got
absolutely.
Lots of ideas. We're going to travel the world, and if it ever opens up.
You not like it's gonna open up. We're gonna force this thing open. There's only so much patience that I can already have, and I've already broken that on a little bit too. So, but thank you, and we'll talk again.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hey guys, want to thank you so much, Sarah. We're going to have this conversation again, but I want to thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch and listen to this. It always is a pleasure, and I'm so always grateful to both the audience and the guests for just taking time to be able to listen to us just sometimes ramble, sometimes have fun, but of course always want to make sure that we're providing great information in between there. This isn't even just our only one. This is our 40th show. So, guys, also check back. Last week, we had the great Katie Sadler of World Rugby. Got my tongue all tied because of how amazing it is. Of World Rugby, the general manager for women's rugby for World Rugby. We've also had Adam Milby, the Philippines president, Philippines Rugby Union president, and a World Rugby Council member. We've had Warren Mullis and Preston Thompson of American Rugby Pod, aka Red, White, and Black Eye. Of course, my guy Tozan Tutatanwe of Viral Rugby. We've had other great Tiara Mack, the state senator for Rhode Island. We've had Tiffany Faye, the 2017 Women's Rugby World Cup captain. We've got Phil Thiel, former USA Rugby. We got Blaine Scully, captain for the men's World Rugby team back in 2019. And of course, we've had great ones. Naya Tapper, formerly mentioned Chetta Emba. We got locals like Tiana and Kyle Granby of Roots Rugby. We've had so many amazing people. Guys, just go check back at the other podcast, because you know what? I'm telling you, these shows mean something. I'm telling you, the more you connect to them, the rugby is going to be better, because you're going to be rooting, and that's why you want to show it with your friends. So please, again, share this with your friends. Definitely check this out. Bring this out to the people, because this is all we're trying to do. We're growing the sport. We're getting bigger. We're creating the industry more and more every day. And every day that we do it is the day that we get closer to being even greater and hit the expectations that people have for us here in the U.S. or over wherever around the world, because we can only get better together. So, guys, I hope you have a great one, and I hope you remember, I hope you're happy, I hope you're healthy, and I hope you know you are highly favored. See you next week. Cheers. Yo, I want to talk to you guys about the HBCU Rugby Classic and Music Festival. Yo, this is the best event that is coming out in terms of cultural rugby. It is a representative of the historically black colleges and universities, but not just simply to represent for them, but to be able to continue to promote the development of rugby in all communities. And we want you guys to know that we are coming back for May 1st and 2nd, 2021. Do not want to miss this one. I know there's a chance that you guys might not be able to come into the stadium, but please be sure to get ready to watch it. We have a great set of teams coming up, great invitations from youth rugby all the way up to senior level rugby. So we are not just going to make it so that you only look for or understand one part, but this is for the whole shebang. This is something that is growing that will only make us better. So definitely check out more information at www.hbcurugbyclassic.com or find us on social media at HBCU Rugby on Twitter, and HBCU Rugby Classic on Facebook and Instagram. Guys, I know you're going to love this.